Okay, so yeah, let's man, I am just a little bit frazzled today. Well, scattered, I think, is more the word. I'm not really frazzled. Nothing is going on. I'm just kind of having a scatterbrained sort of day. Let's clean the screen and make it pristine. And there we go. That should do it. That should ought to do it. And now, need my glove and all this sort of shit. I was thinking earlier today, I don't have any particular thing that I'm trying to do at the moment, but let's turn that on. I have been thinking about kind of from an instruction standpoint what's important to do, and kind of what I was thinking along the lines of was the things that's important to study, and what I kind of came up with was you can divide the body into a few things. First of all, you have the kind of the skull and the spinal cord that run down the center, but more importantly, you have the shoulder girdle, which is where a lot of the action happens. And then you've got the torso, of course. But I kind of think the hips are the most important thing to concentrate on when you're putting the body together, because your character is always going to exist in reference to the ground, okay? So because they always exist in reference to the ground, it's very important to understand where the support structure is, you know? And how are they standing? And where is their weight? And where does the weight of the body have to be for them to stand in that fashion? And understanding how that weight works, this is something that I struggle with a lot. I'm not especially good at it, and I may think it's important because I'm overly focused on it. I don't know if I should be this focused on it, but I'm constantly worried about it. And the reason I'm constantly worried about it is I used to read a lot of indie comics in the 80s, and they would draw a picture of two characters standing somewhere, and it wouldn't look like they were standing there. It would look like they were not standing on a solid surface, but just kind of floating in the air, and a pattern had been placed underneath of them, you know? And I never really understood why they looked that way or what made them look that way. So I'm kind of paranoid about it, because I go, if I can't tell why wrong looks wrong, how am I supposed to know what right looks like? And I don't have a good answer for that. It's just kind of, I think about that, and I think you need a sort of a tripod situation, okay? Where you have to have your weight on the back and front of one foot and on some part of the other foot. So you have to do this sort of, I mean, if you have a stool, you can't just have two legs to a stool. You got to have three, and two of them could be really close together, and that would give you there's one foot and there's the other foot, and one foot can be up on its toe, while the other is fully on the ground. And then you've got that kind of tripod. But the thing that I keep kind of thinking about is, how do you make sure that you get this kind of situation where you have a strong base underneath your character? Like, your hips can kind of float around here. You could tilt over to this side. You could stand over here and have like one leg straight and the other leg sort of off to the side. We've all seen that pose where like somebody will stand and they'll have like one foot over here, and they're kind of leaning over to this side. And we've all seen that like on Instagram or wherever. And what's difficult for me is to go, okay, here's the weight, and you've got this contrapposto thing that goes on where when your weight sits here, okay, when your weight sits on this foot, that pushes this hip up, and this hip, because it's not supported by all of the weight there, if you've got this leg like up in the air, if you're just kind of holding it up like this, then all of your weight is on this, and this forms a kind of lever. So the whole body's weight is pushing over in this direction, and you're going to get a slope to the hips like that. And when you've got that kind of slope to the hips, in order to keep the body upright, the body has to curve and your shoulders have to slope the other way. Okay? And you get this kind of complementary thing that goes on, even when you look at, like, here are your hips straight right here, and here are your shoulders straight up here. But then when you get down here, okay, here are your shoulders angled, and here are the attachments of the femurs angled. And here the femurs are attached to that sort of ball head that fits into what they call the acetabulum, the little joint inside of the pelvis. And you could see that you have this kind of Z-fold thing going on. And then on top of that, okay, you come down here and you've got right here the knees. The knees are kind of driving inward like this because you've got this coming down straight, but then you have this sort of S-curve going on here. And because of that S-curve, this part of the knee is angled, so it's driving inward here. And then your ankles drive in the opposite direction. So like your ankle's the little toe side of the foot here. That's kind of sticking out to the side and angled. Here's the ankle, and over here's your big toe right here. And that's how all of your weight is supported. And you get this kind of in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out kind of thing going on. So you see it slopes in, slopes out, slopes in, slopes out, slopes in, slopes out, slopes in, slopes out. And it just kind of goes back and forth all the way down. And that's how everything stays together, is just to keep that kind of accordion folding shape, and everything is driving out to the side and back in toward the inside. And it just keeps going that way. And you see a lot of that as you go through, like all of the stuff that, all of the different joints that are moving down the body. And what I'm kind of thinking along the lines of is, yeah, I'm not going to draw like a perfect pelvis here or anything, but what you have is sort of you have this sort of ridge up here, and then you have this ridge that comes down here, and then you have in this area, you have this little kind of loop that sits underneath of that, and then around the side you've got the acetabulum there and whatnot, and that's where the ball of the femur sits, and that comes around like that. Because you've got this kind of outward thing, and right here, this That is what we call. God damn it! I've forgotten what it's called. It's called the Great Trochanter. The Great Trochanter is that kind of spot on your hip. That's where the leg actually moves from, and it's a little bit higher when you look at the actual bone. It's a little bit higher than the actual knob that fits into the joint in the pelvis right there. Okay? It sits up a little bit higher, and this little spot right here, it makes a kind of a divot in the hip. Okay? And in a guy, that's kind of like divot. But in a woman, it just kind of smooths into everything. Because women have an additional layer of fat that makes them look smooth and soft. Because they are smooth and soft. Because that's a good thing to have that little extra layer of fat. Just in case you get pregnant. But this is where it seems like the leg folds from. And the Great Trochanter, you're always going to kind of get, when you bend the leg substantially, okay, it all kind of comes from that space. And there's this little triple wrinkle thing that goes on. When skin folds, okay, it's like when you fold your arm, all right, you might think, okay, it just folds. But it doesn't. It folds into three right there. It's got that central fold in it. And you can see it if you look. If you look at your elbow, you can see that kind of additional third bit in there. And it's always three. It never seems to be like a whole bunch. It's always just three. Like, I look at all kinds of joints all over my body and go, yeah, it's three. It's always three. So it comes together and there's that kind of double crease there. That happens all the time. One of the things I've been looking for a lot is I've been looking for patterns in stuff and trying to simplify, because yeah, I'm very much a construction sort of person. I like to construct everything from first principles and just like bring all of those first principles together, and then you make something perfect. But I don't have time, so it's just like you could simplify the crease in an arm by sort of coming in and going, okay, that goes there and that goes there. And you do this kind of X with this little bit that crosses over. So you'd draw, here's your shoulder, and then your upper arm comes down and you go, well, that is going to fold there. And then here's your upper arm and it's going to fold there. And you've got this little area where it's just those two little creases right there. And like, here's the back of it. And so much of it is just what goes in front of what else. Okay? Like, that's one of the things that I'm realizing is just that, just the benefit that you get from going, okay, here's an arm. And if we just draw the outline of the arm, well, that is one thing. But if we draw this bit kind of overlapping, if we draw the upper arm overlapping the lower arm, like so, this is a principle of foreshortening that Hogarth goes into. It's called the interlacing of the joint to the advancing member. If you take the exact same contour and instead overlap the forearm, Now it looks like the forearm is coming forward, as opposed to in this one where it looks like the forearm is moving backward in space. And that's all just about, if you took, like, you could take the exact same silhouette right there, and you just alter which part overlaps which part, and you change how that feels as it exists in space. And you can change it back by just like doing the same thing again. You can change the way that feels. This part is closer, but then you just do this. And now this part is closer. And that all changes just from what overlaps. It's just from which part overlaps there or which part overlaps there. That's why your art teacher is always on your back about tangents. Your art teacher is always on your back about tangents, about things that meet at the same place, because it's not clear which one's in front. Because you don't know which one's in front, you can't easily resolve that into a three-dimensional concept. So you need to identify one of the sides as being in front. It doesn't matter which one, just one of them. You just got to say one of them's in front. You just got to have them meet so that one of them keeps going and one of them stops. It doesn't matter which one keeps going and which one stops, except if you want them to be at the same depth, but you have to identify that this is a three-dimensional shape. One of them is closer than the other. It has to be. And it kind of looks like I'm drawing butts. But, yeah, that's it's a whole lot of stuff. Another thing that I've been thinking about is I've been watching Rising of the Shield Hero, and they kind of draw this fur collar on him. And the way that they do the shadow is they draw this fur collar, but then on the fur collar, let me clear this out right here. On the fur collar, what they do is they take one color, like we'll take a kind of a beigey color right here. They take one color and they fill in the area, like so. But then they act like the space ends, like they have drawn the outline this way. And then they just use, a darker color for the rest of it. And that gives it a really good kind of 3D look. Just to kind of you take a piece of two-dimensional shape, like so. Let's add another layer here. You take any old 3D shape, like, say, this, and you want to go, okay, I want you to know that this is 3D. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this shape right here, and we're going to start with we're going to cut that shape right here, and we're going to say this part is in front, right over here. We can do that with the bucket tool. And then we'll go, okay, and here's our shadow color right here. And now just doing that, you create this three-dimensional look to it if you have this consistent sort of, on one side you have light and on the other side you have shadow. Like if you have underneath of this, there's like if under this you have a cloak, okay? You have this cloak, and the cloak is coming down like this, and we'll say that the cloak is green. So we'll pick a green color and we'll just go, yeah, that's a green cloak. It's an awfully green cloak. I think we're gonna tone that down a bit. Yeah, so more like that kind of green. And then you go, okay, so now we want there to be a shadow location. And if the shadow location follows the same kind of contour like that. Just that simple little bit of work right there just that simple little bit of shading right there makes this look more 3D. And if the rest of your image is shaded in the same way and has the light in the same places, that kind of cheats your way to making things look 3D. And then you can come in here and you can go, well, okay, we want a little bit more shadow here to show that there's a fold in the cloak there. And we're going to want a little bit of highlight here to show, again, there's a fold in the cloak here. You just add a couple of little additional details, and you add a little bit of added style to it. You make sure that you actually follow the contour of the garment. And maybe you soften things up a little, or maybe you don't because you're working in an anime style, and anime doesn't really have a lot of soft edges. But just that kind of simplicity is something that I've been trying to work with. And one of the things that I really have been sort of messing with is I've been using the fingertip tool a lot to sort of contour things and blend areas into one another. I've been messing a lot with the fingertip tool because I kind of like it as a method of working with color in a somewhat unusual way. And I've been doing all kinds of interesting stuff with this, but I'm not sure how useful the stuff I'm doing is. I'm doing too much work that is fucking around, and not enough work that is producing finished art, you know? And a lot of that is I don't feel like I should be doing finished art because I look at too much stuff and go, I can't do anything like that. And like, here's a good example of something right here, okay? Is like, there should absolutely be hard edges and soft edges. And one of the things that I kind of feel like I'm not doing effectively is identifying where the hard edges should be and just leaving them alone. There's always a part of me that wants to fuck with it and make them more interesting, and I really shouldn't. I need to stop doing that and get rid of that impulse, you know? But I feel like these areas, it's like if you zoom in on them and you look at them in detail, then it's just like you look at that and you go, that looks good as a finished piece of art, but I'm not really doing finished pieces of art. I'm just kind of fucking around and doing weird shit that I just kind of mess with. And I'm not really accomplishing much. I was reading a bunch of stuff this week from people who say, I don't feel like I've achieved much. And it's really easy for me to look at somebody who's like in their 20s and say, well, of course you haven't achieved much. You're in your 20s. You're not supposed to have achieved anything in your 20s. You're supposed to have achieved things in your 30s. But in order to achieve things in your 30s, you got to spend your 20s trying to achieve things. And in order to try to achieve things, you got to stop worrying about whether you have achieved stuff. And that kind of motivational sort of speech, That makes a whole lot of sense. And coming from a guy in his 50s, you know, you're like, oh yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. And then at the same time, I will sit here and go, man, I don't feel like I've done enough finished artwork. Of course I haven't done enough finished artwork. I still need to feel like I can finish artwork. I don't feel like the artwork I do finish is very good. And I kind of wrestle with that because I'm like, should I go back and redo art that I've previously done? Or should I go back and fix art that I've previously done? Or should I just ignore the art that I've previously done and do brand new art? And I don't know the answer to that. And I think the value of that to the audience is like, oh, look, this guy doesn't know the answer to that either. None of us know the fucking answer to that. We all wrestle with the same goddamn questions. We do it all the fucking time. And what I'm kind of doing today is, well, I am mostly just thinking about stuff and not actually doing a whole lot of stuff. Like I've been thinking a lot about structure. I've been thinking a lot about things like I've been watching a bunch of people teach on YouTube. And I've been thinking a lot of these people are really, really good artists, but they are not very good teachers. And because they're not very good teachers, you know, I don't get a lot of stuff out of their work. They're fun to listen to. They're fun to watch. I mean, it's like it's neat seeing people who are good artists do a thing, even if they're not really explaining what they're doing. And I feel like a lot of the time the appeal of the artist is just vibes. And yeah, you can watch somebody, you can go, this guy's good at what he does. Clearly he must have stuff to teach. But just because you have stuff to teach doesn't mean you're any good at teaching it. And it's like I was sitting there and I was going, you know, you can kind of divide the human body into a shoulder girdle, the torso here, and the legs. So you got kind of the upper body, lower body thing, and then you got the head. And I was just thinking, you know, you should really kind of teach people to do the head and the lower body, to just kind of do the edges and then fill in the torso and then put the upper body girdle around it. Because when you look at it from above, okay, here's your upper body shoulder girdle right here. And this bone right here that your clavicles fit into, that's called the manubrium right there. That kind of circles around, and back here is just muscle. It's just muscle. Your scapulae, they float. Okay? Your humerus just floats there. And you've got the clavicle. And one of the things I've mentioned before is that, like, people go, okay, you got your upper arm and your lower arm. But the thing is, all of these move. This isn't a very flexible joint in here at the manubrium, but it is a joint. And the clavicle does flex and move upward. And because it flexes and moves upward, the upper arm can move with it. So when you're sitting there and you're going, okay, here's my person, and they're going to raise their arm does not get raised like this. Their arm gets raised like this, and everything stretches. And on top of that, because of the way that your body moves when you raise your arm, because the clavicle moves, but the scapula can't move as far, the entire body kind of twists, and you could see that happen. You could see all of that muscle from the back moving forward along the side of the body. And you get that kind of, there's a twist twist that happens as the arm is raised. So that twist to the body, in order to raise your arm that high, there's a point where in order to get your arm any higher, your other shoulder has to move back. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of people don't pay attention to that. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, the shoulder girdle. Shoulder girdle's not really attached anywhere except at the front. It's just got that muscle around it. The bone would just kind of, this whole thing could lift off. Like here's your sternum. Here's all your ribs coming off of your sternum right here. This whole bit here with the arms attached to it, you just take it straight off over your head. It would just all lift straight up. Except, of course, that you have muscles that are attaching everything together. And the manubrium and the sternum are kind of, they're kind of fused. You don't really have much of a joint there. I mean, there is a joint in the sense that it's two separate bones, but it's not like it flexes very much. I'm kind of gradually developing a list of things that I think other people have missed. Like the general hexagonal shape of the rib cage. Because right here you've got your shoulder blades, and right here you've got your sternum, and here's your manubrium up here, and you've got all your ribs are coming around like this. And as you get farther down, they're kind of looping in larger swoops. So you get this kind of tilted hexagon going on. And then you kind of got your skull sitting on top of that. And that means your arms are actually sitting back behind your hips. I mean, this is exaggerated, but you have this kind of structure, and your knee would be more like right there. There's your ankle, and here's your foot. People forget how far back the foot goes. The foot goes fairly far back. I feel like that's a value I could really offer to people, is to just kind of pay attention and go, things people miss. They forgot this part. They didn't tell you this part. The frustrating thing is, I'm going to be in a place where I could help people with their art long before I'm in a place where people want to look at my art. But unless people want to look at my art, nobody cares what I can do to help them with their art. They won't believe me. They're like, what do you mean you know how to do it? If you know how to do it, why don't you do it? Because I suck. I'm a better teacher than I am an artist. That's the raw truth of it. I'm better at understanding things than I am at practicing things. The theory is much easier for me. So I feel like there are a couple of things here, like the way the body is constructed is kind of like here's this round thing here up on the top, and here's this round thing here down on the bottom, and here's all your guts kind of like in a ball in the middle. And here's your neck, here's your back. Your neck tilts back a little bit, your back curves back a little bit, and then you've got this sort of swing here, and right here, you got this big ball of guts. And up in here, you only got your heart and your lungs. That's pretty much it. We're up inside of there. Everything else is down here. That's all there is to it. There was a guy on Tumblr earlier this week who was saying, your first mistake is thinking that you draw women and men fundamentally differently. And I was scratching my head and going, well, not fundamentally, but differently. I mean, you do draw them differently because you have all of the signals of whether they're men or women. But no, the fundamentals aren't different. All of the anatomy is the same. You draw this a little bit smaller and this a little bit larger, but that's just a general guideline. There's a huge amount of individual difference. And I don't know what that guy's purpose was, because it seems to me like when you first start out, you're not trying to represent the full spectrum of difference. And when you do get around to representing the full spectrum of difference, it's kind of obvious that you don't draw men and women fundamentally differently. You don't have a you don't have a real how to draw men and how to draw women difference. There's a how to draw titties difference. That's what it is. In order to draw women, you need to draw titties. And, you know, unless you're drawing like porn and you're drawing naked people and then you got to draw genitalia. But that's a whole different subject. The main thing about drawing people, drawing men and women differently is women got titties. That's about it. And most people don't talk about those effectively. Like, here's your chest, okay? And here's where the breast comes from. It comes from under the armpit, right there. That's where the breast comes from, up from under the armpit. So when you see, like, pictures of a chest and it's like, well, here are the boobs here. Your clothes might do that, but your skin doesn't. And doing the kind of heart-shaped thing where, like, here's the neck. Yeah, that doesn't look right. And it doesn't look right for a reason, because that's not where the breast comes from. The breast comes from up under the arm. It needs to go up there. And people don't draw it that way. So it ends up looking funky. And I can't draw a really good picture to demonstrate it, but anyway. I don't know. I'm just rambling. I feel like, well, honestly, I feel like these may be the most valuable videos that I do, are the ones where I just ramble and draw and try to put things on the screen and talk about shit. At some point, these are all going to come together. These are all going to come together, and it's going to be really cool. It's been 2.5 years. I don't know why it hasn't come together yet. But yeah, that's where things are. That's what I'm doing. And how long has this been? Oh shit, almost 40 minutes. Do a little YouTube dance, like, comment, subscribe, hit the little bell icon, all of that happy horse shit. Yeah, that is basically okay. Bye.